Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Enrique Dutra, Director of Product Marketing here at Lead Square, and I will be your moderator for today's session. We're talking about rethinking student engagement in the AI age. So we all know enrollment, marketing, and student success teams are under a lot of pressure right now. So students expect fast and personal responses, and leaders are looking for ways to improve retention. And suddenly, in the middle of all of this is AI. In the middle of every conversation, in the middle of the chaos, we have AI. So our goal today is to treat AI as a practical partner, not just a hype or a buzzword. We will look into how schools are using AI to personalize admissions, make retention work more, let's say, proactive, and support classroom engagement, and hopefully tie all of this together in one student journey that still feels human. So, without further ado, let me quickly introduce these two amazing guests who are right in the middle of all this craziness of all this AI work. First, we have Dana Hutton, Chief Marketing and Enrollment Management Officer at Southeastern College. Dana oversees both marketing and enrollment there. So she sees the entire journey from first inquiry through the student success. Dana, I'd love for you to share a quick intro as well, and tell folks what you've been up to at Southeastern.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes. So, welcome everyone. I'm Dana Hutton. I've been with Southeastern College most of my 18-year career, and I've been in everything from an admissions coordinator to director of admissions, regional campus president. So, I've walked on both sides of operations, admissions, and marketing. We are in that AI era, of course, where we have been for a little while, but it's really evolved and it's mad changing every day, but it's exciting in my personal opinion. And so I'm just really excited to be here and talk with you today and learn with you as well. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for taking the time and for being here with us. We're also joined by Sterling Simpson, VP of Business Development at Enrollment Resources. That's the second time I'm having a webinar with Sterling. He works with schools across North America on enrollment strategy and performance, and he also spends a lot of time thinking about how AI fits into recruitment and advising. Sterling, do you want to add a bit about your role and what you're focused on these days?
Yeah, exactly. So I've been at Enrollment Resources since 2012 and actually started working on Google Ads and SEO and CRO, someone who's actually doing the in the weeds because my experience was doing that for years before I came to ER. And then over time, I moved into a business development role. So I've sort of seen it from front to back because I do a lot of admissions, do a lot of marketing. I still am involved in a lot of that. And I consult with a lot of schools. We currently have 130 to 140 schools we work with. And so, yeah, we've been seeing it pretty much from day one. About 4 years ago is when I first was exposed to it. And we internally at ER have been working with AI for that long too. Because there's so many avenues it could be helpful in. So yeah, we're pretty early adopters with regards to institutions, and so yeah, had a great experience so far, and looking forward to the future with it.
Great, great. Thank you both. So, a few quick housekeeping notes before we jump in. So, this session is being recorded. We will share a link for the recording after the webinar. Also, please use the Q&A box for questions as they come to you. You do not need to wait until the end. I'll try to keep an eye out for those questions throughout the session, but we're also going to have 5 to 10 minutes at the end, specifically for this. So here's how we will spend our time today. We will start talking about admissions and AI-driven personalization. Then we're going to move into predictive retention, then talk about classroom engagement, and hopefully, like I said, we're going to close by connecting all of the dots together on how this fits into one student journey, and then, like I said, finish with the Q&A. Okay, so let's dive into admissions. Let's start at the beginning of the journey. AI promises personalization at scale, but students still want conversations that feel genuine and real. So then I'll start with you here. When you think about AI-driven personalization in admissions, what does, good look like today? I'm thinking beyond, basic things like extracting your name from your LinkedIn and your profile and putting into a personalized email. When you use AI well in admissions, what should that experience feel for, the students from the student's point of view?
It's a great question, right? And I could probably spend hours on it because there's so many aspects that are now simplified for us that allow a quicker and better communication with our student. So it's a lot more than just that personalization, right? So when you really truly think about it, there's AI has allowed for like real-time signals, right, for intent and behavioral data to tailor the journey for the student. In doing that, we're able to, remove the friction and really guide our admissions staff in supporting the student's unique path. And one of the things that I highly recommend is to having some type of business intelligence and analytics so that you have clean and clear data. Um, when you have that, you can take a deeper dive into your marketing analytics. So I'm going to swing on both sides for a second, and then I'll bring it full circle for us. So once you have data from where that inquiry or lead is coming from, you'll know what source that brought that particular inquiry. Is it a re-inquiry? Once you have that information, then you can start to understand the behaviors. And, messaging changes on whether a prospect, watched a program and caught your commercial, or they heard you on the radio, or they clicked some type of digital ad and then they led you right to your website. So there's a lot of those things that we can tell when we have good data, which actually allows us or nudges us, I would say, to, understand the value that's important for that particular inquiry. The next best action models really kind of push that, whether it be call or text or a virtual tour or appointment links. And once you have that information, then you can actually, begin to customize your CRM to nurture the journey and the cadence. So I know I took us on a little bit of a long path there, but it's really important that you understand those things because then you can customize your messaging to students and your conversations to students, knowing their behaviors, which is really neat. I utilize two different business intelligent points. So I have one for metrics and I also have one for marketing because that allows me to understand again the behaviors and then the journey. So, we're calling in the appropriate call windows. We're texting or we're emailing versus calling, depending upon what that particular person has requested. We know when the email engagement is low, so then we come up with more phone volume. So reducing frequency, for communication and increasing the high intent users is really neat in that perspective.
Perfect, perfect. Can you think of or can you share a real example where, tailor recommendations or, hyper personalization led to a clear lift in either engagement or conversion? Or even better, can you think of a campaign where things drastically change before and after AI, something more like objective, more, I would say like a real use case?
Sure. I'll give you both, right? So everything changed when we implemented our CRM. We had a very low contact rate, and that's because we were utilizing an SIS system versus a CRM system. So in the SIS system, we relied on the human being to know when, to reach out to the student versus utilizing data analytics to task the admissions team when and how to reach out to a student. So implementing, and it took me about 8 months to truly customize our CRM system for our campuses because I wanted to put, as much thought process in it so that we are as student friendly and engaging as possible. And so in doing that, we talked about a non-nursing path. We talked about a nursing path. We really took into consideration each individual, segue into the admissions points and the enrollment process. And with that, we increased our contact rate from a 26% to over a 40%, which obviously has the ripple effect, right? So that was kind of an overall thing. specific campaigns. We do specific campaigns all the time, but two specific campaigns that have really helped in automation is our admissions teams work our dropped students or withdrawal students that are 365 days or older. So we have automated our systems to prompt task. As soon as they see that LDA date be 1 year or older, then admissions immediately takes that on so that those students are never left, so that we can help them and assist them in coming back to start what they finish. And then additionally, same thing, with graduates. We have automation that's put into our CRM system that nurtures our graduates for continuing education and alumni participation as well.
Perfect. That is super, super insightful. Let me move to Sterling now, because Sterling, I bet you get to see this across many schools. Where do you see schools wasting, the most effort today that AI could easily handle? For example, manual segmentation, follow-up, routing, that kind of work.
Yeah, so there's so many different avenues you could go into, and like ideally in within a school, you look into like where time is being spent and try to prioritize there by where you could cut down time. But there's so many like different areas that AI can save time and maintain the same quality, or sometimes even be better quality than a human. So one of the big areas like that I look at, and you mentioned already, is manual segmentation, sorting leads. The biggest one probably for that could make the biggest change right away is having any repetitive follow-ups be automated, not only so they come out instantly, but also so you could curate it, make sure it's perfect, and then split test it and be able to test different follow-ups and see which get better replies. One thing that I use it a lot for is summarizing data. So you might have a lead record or a lot of information on a student, and you could put that information into your AI platform and get it to summarize what the main goals are, or the barriers, or anything like that. So you could go into that first point of contact conversation with a little bit of advantage, knowing how to appeal to this person correctly. Anything that requires copying and pasting between systems, AI is exceptional for. And so what I'd say is you want to use it for any tasks where the time is being wasted and there's no strategic value to the people wasting that time. AI could do like a lot of things are already mentioned is watching student behavior in real time, identifying high intent students, prioritizing outreach, personalizing first responses automatically rather than waiting for a human to sit there and read the file or make a email. You could have AI look at information and create a dynamic first response that will meet all the needs with what information you have, and of course it's instant, which is the best part. um, so yeah, pretty much you could eliminate all the busy work. And that's what I'd say is look into how many hours are being spent on busy work. Little things that can be done, tasks that are repeatable, tasks it's the same thing every time. Those are the things where AI right away will save a lot of time. There's so much more it could do, but in the first go, that's what I want to look at. How can I save my admission reps time? And then deeper and later in the journey, how can I save the rest of my team's time when trying to give the student a great experience?
Perfect. No, no, that's great. Since you talked about student behavior, let's pivot the discussion a little bit and talk about predictive intelligence, but not in the admissions part, on more on the retention side of things. Because once the student is enrolled, the engagement challenges changes. So traditionally, retention work before AI has been very reactive. A student stops logging in or start missing classes or fails a course, and only then does someone reach out. So let me ask you both on this. How would you say, or in what way are institutions using predictive models today to spot at-risk students earlier, in the term? What does early in this case actually looks like? What is actually changing in a real scenario? Who'd like to take this one?
I'll take it if that's okay with you, Sterling, and then you
Yeah,
can
no problem.
me. I think it's a great question, and you have to think about it because you really want early, prevention. So a lot of institutions are collecting that data, and again, I'm going to continue to talk about how important it is to have good data, right? So if you don't trust your data, then you really can't trust the AI around it. So if you have those data points, again, we have customized another academic Power BI, and we don't just look at-risk students. We look at all students' progress. In this particular feature that our Vice President of Academics just developed, she did a great job because she has trends and pace and everything there. So, for example, if she's looking at Dana Hutton and Dana Hutton has a 4.0 GPA, in 2 days her GPA goes to a 2.9, then we're already able to have that, intervention because that's not a normal pace for that particular student. So it's too late when a student has hit SAP, right? I mean, we're at a really critical point in the student journey. So having that information and being able to have that intervention is also a big faculty buy-in too, right? Because we don't want to get to a place where we have to be reactive. We want to be in a good place to where we can be proactive. So that is something that we have found to be very helpful. We're starting to see an increase of successful outcomes. And then in making sure that a student doesn't feel singled out, it's just communicating that feature with the student. I see that in admissions as a feature and benefit of the campus, right? I mean, that's a great support mechanism for every student. My school cares about me as they're going to watch my progress and they're going to be reaching out to me if at any time that they feel that I'm in a place where I might, not be successful.
Perfect. Yeah, no, I love what you said about, your AI is only as good as the data that you're, feeding to the system. So when you look at those models, what type, you mentioned, a sudden drop in GPA, for instance, but what types of signals tend to be most useful? And on the flip side, what some people tend to overvalue or, also undervalue when it comes to those signals or data? Maybe Sterling, I'm not sure, Dana, if you can take this one or Sterling.
You can continue what you said, then I'll add something at the end.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's the value for it is making sure that, we are looking to see if there are any downward trends and then immediately having the response time to make sure that, a student who's taking a month class, right? Because that we roll in month modules. If a student is behind in week one, they're already behind. So spotting that, and having that signal immediately helps us to have that remedy. So I hope that that helps to give that example. And then Sterling, I'll let you piggyback off of that.
Yeah, and so the thing about AI and originally what was really good at like years ago, like I remember when we were learning about 8 years ago and how it's going to be amazing, was its predictive capabilities. One of the first tasks that AI really excelled and was better at humans at was predicting cancer, especially brain cancer. It could look at scans, and because it's seen so many, it was able to see really early in cases of brain cancer happening and other types of cancer too, and it outperformed humans massively, just beyond what a human could do. And so it's all about the predictive side. If you give it like as I said before, good data, you get real data, you get good data, and then like if you give it enough data, it could see the outcomes and the people who have failed before based off different things and be able to find that really early. So areas where, it's really helpful, like in your LMS, engagement, the attendance patterns, like login frequency, if you have a portal to log into, missed tasks, advisor notes. But it's not just one of these hitting a threshold. AI would be able to look at, see different where you are in different areas in this and be able to put together and predict that in the future, because of the patterns, this will happen. So that's an area where, like, as long as you give it good data and you understand what the outcomes were before and able to feed that in, then going forward, it will be able to predict sooner. And then as time goes on, it gets better. The more data it has, it just gets better and better. So over time, you have all these different signals, and when they hit the certain threshold, the AI tells you to intervene or does it itself if you have it set up that way. That's where it gets very powerful, and you're saving people even before they know they need to be saved, which is the thing. AI gets so good at predicting stuff before the human even feels that because it can see the patterns before.
Perfect. Well, that makes sense. And you're talking about, having all the signals, and then AI is going to tell you to intervene. So let's go to the more, human side of things. What happens next? Once a risk is flagged, what does an effective response plan look like on the ground? So who gets involved and what kind of outreach works, the best? And also, how do you balance that so the student doesn't feel like he's being monitored, he's being helped and supported in a more, natural and humane way. Dana,
Well, I
maybe
Oh,
think
you
different.
want to do
I
that?
think everybody's involved, right? I mean, from the instructor to the program director to the dean, et cetera. So it's really important that everybody has this data. I think that you bring up a really important point in asking, like, how does the student not feel singled out, right? And again, that goes back to eliminating bias. And that was something, that a lot of schools struggled with as they were trying to, determine some of the AI cases that I've read about, because that's the one thing that you don't want to have is a bias. And data can, easily create that. So that's why I would recommend, monitoring everyone's, progress and being open and transparent in how we do this and why we do this and what to expect. That way, the student never feels like it's a bad thing. It's a preventative thing in helping them to progress to successful outcomes.
Perfect. And what has helped, because we have AI in different, teams, different segments, what has helped you to get, academic leaders, advisors, and student success teams on the same page, so everyone is working together instead of, separate silos? How can you make sure that this communication is happening, effectively and in a, I would say, natural way?
I think making sure that people understand that it's not a threat, right? That's where a lot of people become concerned. Oh, this is something that's going to take over my job. No, it's something that's going to enhance your job. It's going to enhance the student experience. It's going to enhance the outcomes. And so I think when we, allow people to understand the why and how to utilize things and to see user cases, that's been huge, right? So an example, buy-in, I mentioned it earlier, but I've also been in operations, so I understand that importance of having faculty buy-in. But one of the things that we did in admissions was utilizing AI for product knowledge training. Because in admissions, you don't need to know everything about it. You need to know the razzle dazzle facts. You need to know, the important points of program knowledge. And of course, that has changed in the last 10 years because, generational changes. People want to know things now, right? But we utilized Google Notebook LM and created podcasts for program knowledge. But we had everybody involved, right? And of course, compliance, legal, but faculty, the program directors, and they loved it. They were like, wow, so how do I, this puts everything into layman's terms, you can give it directive. So, like, once they saw that little bit, then they were asking more questions and more questions. And so, I think just showing them, as Sterling was saying earlier, how to simplify things and how to time management, right? And having more free time. I call it brain power. Use your brain power for other things
Yeah.
and let that take over, let AI take over the simple tasks for us, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, and
Perfect.
I also find if you ease people in, it takes away that fear a bit. So one thing that you could do is even before you start using more advanced AI or stuff in your systems, get everyone a paid version of ChatGPT or whatever version, whatever language model you like, and let them play around. They start to see the value and they have fun with it and they start to trust it more. They aren't seeing it as the enemy. And like, yeah, just like you said, it's such a time saver when you could show people in real applications how it will save them time and produce the same quality or better quality than what they're currently doing. That's where you've won them. It's all about, are you making their life easier and are you saving them time? If it's something where they feel there's too much of a hurdle to get there, that's where you might get some pushback.
It's such a
Eh,
great recommendation, Sterling, because getting people that paid version of Chat GPT will allow, and I try to introduce it to them on personal aspects, right? So like we had someone who was going to the Outer Banks a few months ago, and I'm like, use Chat GPT, like plan your whole trip. And they were like, use what? And I was talking to the security officer here last night, and she was talking to me about watching her carb intake. And she's like, how do you document that? I was like, Chat GPT. And she was like, what? Show me, show me. And I showed her how to like create a menu and get a grocery list. And she's like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna be using this thing all day, And I was like, absolutely. But I think that getting them excited and showing them what it can do for them on a personal level will only increase their, curiosity into the professional side of things
Yeah,
too.
exactly.
One thing that can happen, and I've heard a lot about this, not just on the business setup, also on the personal setup, is alert fatigue. So getting a lot of notifications about a lot of different things. So one thing that people worry, they end up a lot of I would say, a full dashboard that they cannot control. How do you make sure that people are getting useful information from those systems without feeling overwhelmed, without feeling that, oh, this is irrelevant, I'm getting too much information? So how do you help them to prioritize what they're seeing and what's not exactly, necessary at that time? Story, maybe you can. I'm
Yeah.
more. Yeah.
So there's a few things that you want to do. You want to look at actionability over availability. So
Mhm.
just because you could get something done quickly, if no one could answer that for a certain time period, or there's nothing available to actually follow up on that, there's no point in doing things fast unless there's a real action behind it. Um, Another thing too is you might have too many signals, as you said earlier. You might have this flag go off and this flag and this notification. You bundle those. So you'd bundle the signals. So when it hits a certain threshold, that's where you actually get notified. So it's not just going to hit you when one behavior is different. Maybe you have 10 different behaviors you're looking at. And when the threshold that is determined to be enough for you to intervene gets to that level, that's where you jump in. So you're not being hit with all these notifications. It's only going to be the really critical one that's going to come in. Um, and this is something that happens, I think, with every organization. Everywhere I've ever worked has happened is make sure that the right people get the information and get the signals because sometimes it could, everyone in the organization gets the notification or gets the update and it's not relevant to all these people. And you just don't want to put more noise in there because the relevant ones might get missed or might be looked at with a lesser, degree of confidence because they're getting all these other signals that aren't relevant to them. And going back to the bundling, the way that works better is if you use thresholds and not triggers. So you don't have it just be like it's not binary. Oh, boom, it's a threshold. When certain things have all added together to hit to this threshold, that's when something happens. And again, that will just lower the amount of uh, input you're getting and notifications, and it's just going to be when it's really critical is when that step will happen to suggest to intervene or whatever the next step is. Um, so yeah, if you focus on like that, focus on the bigger picture, not the individual things. Look at how they add together and what it means when they come together. And then at least at that point, every time you're getting a alert or a signal, it's going to be consequential and something that's actionable, not just something to, oh, that's good to know. You want something actionable when you actually do the signals.
Perfect. No, this is great. This is super helpful. We're getting we got a couple of questions here about, data, CRM data, privacy concerns, and also what kind of prompts to use to eliminate bias. I think I'll save those for the Q&A, because I think we should just move forward. We have great discussion here, but we only have 30 minutes left. So we have talked about, getting students in the door, and keeping them on track. But now let's talk about going inside the classroom. AI is also changing how students learn and how faculty teach. Sometimes some people can say it's a distraction, but other time, it opens up a new ways to engage, to learn, how students learn. And normally, some people who might not speak up are becoming more vocal and more, active in the classroom. So I'll start with you this time, Dana. From your perspective here, where do you see AI making the classroom more engaging or more inclusive rather than more distractive?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much diverse learning, right? And so I think that it allows faculty to create more unique learning availabilities for students and modalities for students. I'm in South Florida visiting right now, and obviously it's very diverse here, but it is across everywhere. I always joke and say that, college is no longer cookie cutter. So, there's an experience for everyone. And so I think enhancing that um, eh, classroom experience, but keeping the same academic integrity is super important too. And so, there's ways of, making the classroom more interactive by embracing AI. And if you think about it, 10 years ago, we were all up in arms about how we're going to keep a cell phone out of the classroom, right? But then we embraced it and we allow the cell phone in the classroom. I'm always appalled that my 14-year-old nephew is able to have his cell phone at school. That blows my mind. But we're in the same kind of position, So I think taking it and embracing it and showing students how to utilize it to be helpful, not to challenge the integrity of their academic process or themselves, but to utilize that in helping them to understand and comprehend and take things into layman's terms and summarize things. Sterling had talked about that earlier. I utilize it to summarize things all the time because I move very quickly. Obviously, I'm an admissions person, so I'm extremely impatient. So when I get an email that's longer than 3 sentences, I'm like, summarize this, right? But it helps me to comprehend and move on to the next thing. So that would be kind of my take on the classroom. But I'm sure that Sterling has some good information there too.
I just wanted to add on to the summarize part because especially when you get an email that is like a ton of people in it, it's a big string, there's a long email. I'll put it in and say, "Can you summarize this email? Then tell me what is applicable to me. Tell me what the action items are for me, and you use layout exactly, and it'll tell you like this is what was said to you, and then you have everything there." And I also like doing that in the CRM too, like summarize stuff, and you could pop it into your CRM as a summary, so you have an easy, quick way for someone later to look at that record, if we're talking about managing a prospective student. But yeah, the summaries save time, and it makes it just consumable. And especially if you have anything that is time sensitive, it's just nice to not have to like go through something big or find where it's important to you.
Perfect. And do you guys have any examples? So we talked about summarization as a use case, but do you guys have any examples of adaptive or interactive tools that has helped, quieter students to be, more dynamic in class or more active, or even other use cases that you can use AI for in the classroom?
Do you want to give
I,
this a
I
shot?
would I would say classroom pilot feedbacks, and getting the student feedback on things that we are doing. We have utilized some AI in doing that, like with, enhancing the student survey so that we have good understanding of where they are. Um, you know, it's uh, it's more or less like with I've heard of other schools in doing that, working on the task force where they've developed their own AI task forces inside of the schools or committees for like policy development and things like that, go back to again, not undermining the learning, but enhancing that. But I don't have any specifics that I would be able to share today, but I'd be happy to circle back to that at a later date.
No, sounds good. Perfect. Is there anything that you could share, any real life examples for use cases or tools, or maybe personal
Well,
use cases?
Especially like this is a pretty basic one, but I think people don't think about this as much as they should. If you're doing any sort of anything online or it's correspondence or blended learning, and you're using meetings to have with your students, always have a note taker. And it might sound simple, but a good note taker, especially the more comprehensive ones, you could actually query them. They have their own internal query. So you have the note taker, and then students have the notes, but also it's queryable. So you could ask it very critical things and it'll give you summaries right there. So a good note taker, some of the free ones are fine, but if you pay a little money for a more sophisticated note taker, then they could do stuff that is like quite cool. They could do, there's so many different features within them for summarizing things, getting responses, querying it. Even if you're doing using note takers for admissions outreach, they could tell you what you did well and what you didn't do. You could load into your actual sales models into it or your discovery questions, all that type of stuff. So I think it's something that people like everyone knows about the note takers, but they don't know that it could be used in so many different places. I've even been in places where people have a note taker and just put it in the room. Like they'll put their phone on, put the note taker on like it's a meeting, but everyone's in person and still does great notes, takes track of everything, and can still summarize very well. So yeah, that's an area that I think people could get more creative in how they use it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Even
I would
for
just like to interject really quickly because I did think of one thing as Sterling was talking about that, but Google Notebook LM kind of has those same features too. So you can pull out, you can do study guides with that uh, for that particular feature, and it's free. So you can go on and kind of play around with that. But there are places where you can, do more of like the syllabus, like drafting syllabus outlines. Of course, you could utilize Chat GPT for that, but creating like the formative quiz questions or case studies, like that's really important, right? Like when you're looking
Mm.
at nursing or medical assisting or occupational therapy. And then the note taking is great, right? Because you're simplifying. what just happened in that particular conversation, and putting into reading material that doesn't, uh, compromise the integrity of the conversation. So just got my brain thinking a little bit about that as you were talking there, and I was like, hey, that would be a good one. And napkin AI is pretty cool too. Definitely throw that one out there too. But we'll talk about some of those later.
Awesome, awesome. And aside from, virtual or online note takers, I think there are some hardware tools that you can use, like kind of like a microphone that you can carry you all the time. That's going to summarize all the conversations that you have in a day. I'm not sure if that's good for your memory because basically outsourcing everything that you do. But you can use those, physical hardware note takers today to basically record your entire day, all the conversations and meetings that you have, and it's going to create a summary for you at the end of the day. We got another one here. What about any live interactions with the students? Just got this question. Who could take on this one? Sterling and Dana. Uh,
Does that mean live with current students or potential students? Like,
the question was, what about any live interactions with the students? Maybe using AI for live interactions,
For
using AI.
sure. There's all kinds of things out there right now. I mean, chat bots. There are so many things that are enhancing the conversations with students. There's a couple of different products that are available, and I'll make reference to that when we talk about the task force later. Um, but yeah, I mean, there are even chatbots that are being developed right now that can immediately connect you to a AI person that will take, you can customize it. You can say that, hey, you're going to be talking to Sparky, and then all of a sudden, Sparky is talking exactly how you would train an admissions coordinator to talk. Those are being custom for, outside hours, weekend hours where people are not available. And there's so many neat features to those particulars. We're looking at those for our campuses right now. So I will make a couple of references later on, but I don't have all of them off the top of my head just because there's thousands and they're in development all the time.
Perfect. Sounds good. Sterling, would like to add to this, or can we move?
oh yeah, we could move on looking at the time.
Yeah, oh, we just got another one, but I'll save those for the Q&A, just to make sure that we are on time. So Sterling, just one last thing on this topic for you. For institutions that are curious, but do not want to overhaul their, LMS, for instance, what are some simple entry points for AI supported learning? Or Dana, maybe you can also answer to this one. Things that they can test without any major system changes in the classroom or in the, institution.
Yeah, I'd say it's always safe to start with low risk entry points. So you want to start with things around the LMS without actually making changes to it at the moment. So there's a lot of AI assisted tools that could help with study and support, provide like on-demand help 24/7 because they're AI, so it's awesome in that way. AI generated quizzes, I think you spoke about that earlier, and practice tests. That could all be done through AI. Getting feedback on writing assignments. I'm not sure to what level, how much time that will save, but I assume having AI giving feedback right away, whether it's unofficial or official, can help a lot. Discussion helpers can be through AI as well. If you have any way to have, it gives them a way to have another resource that could be available for them. One thing that people might overlook is using it for personalized learning nudges. So you have AI reminders that could be like little baby next steps, little simple steps to help people or best next steps. Um, and then, yeah, external chat-based companions. We spoke about that a little bit already, but any sort of AI-specific chatbot, trained in the course materials and the syllabus can help a student at any time. And none of that needs to encroach on the LMS. They're all external things you can do. And then, if they're very successful, that's where you take the next step in and actually can make LMS changes or go deep into there. But these are all like easy things that are sort of on the outside of the LMS, so they're not going to cause any issues and they're quite easy to implement.
Perfect. Okay. Oh, so the question that we got, it was about someone was asking, submitting data that contains personal information or company data breaks certain student data privacy requirements due to how these companies handle and sell data sent into their AI infrastructure. So how do you guys safely maneuver around this to ensure data integrity? some people are even liking the question, so I think that's relevant for everyone who would like to take on this one. I can also share a few things that I've learned, but would like to go first.
I mean, I was trying to save some of it for the end, but I did just work with the CQ task force and developing a best practices guide. We have an entire section for legal for a reason, right? But it's really important that you always know what product that you are using. And, I'm sure that there's a lot of people on this call that are pitched daily, if not hourly, by different resources and things that are being in development. But it's important that you know the integrity of that company, the integrity of that resource or that particular AI. And it's also extremely crucial that, your legal and compliance departments, are reviewing all of these things before you partner with them to make sure that the legalities are straight. I wouldn't, I think that Sterling has given great advice in start small, like on some of these things. See what's out there. And then if you find value in those particulars, then bring those to your company and go about it the right way so that you have, again, integrity in that process. Um, and also that you're compliant with all of, the regulations that we abide by.
Yeah, and we actually have to deal with this a lot too because we're working with law schools, and when working with law schools, we got all the information that we help them get the leads and post into the CRM. So we're in the middle there where we're actually collecting a lot of student data. So there's a few like basic things that we always like go by if you're going to do this. One of them is make sure the platform does not train on your data. So some platforms are trained on your current data. Some of them it's a fixed model. They've already done the train and you're getting the current version. You want to use that way so it's not training on your data. That way it won't get into their ecosystem. Keep it identifiable data out of it whenever you can, especially out of prompts. So you could use like aggregated data, you could use non-identifiable data about the student, but you try to keep personal information and identifiable data out of those prompts. And you want to keep the environment as secure as possible. So if you're using, whatever AI you're using, make sure not only it's secure, but who you allow to have access to it. It's got to be very secure. You want to have rigorous rules around who can access that data, how it can be used. And so if you look at those three things first, then you should cover yourself in most cases with regards to sharing data.
Yep, definitely. And also some more advanced tools today, they're doing something called data anonymization, which means before submitting the data to the AI, you have a layer that's going to identify what's sensitive or not. It can be, depending on the question, on the cases, credit card information, birth dates, like names, anything that you don't want to share. And the system's going to automatically hide all this data before submitting to the AI. So this is a more, I would say, dynamic and easier way to hide the information. They were 100% sure it's not going to be submitted, but I'm not sure what actually tools are actually implementing that for now. But that's a new solution that I think is quite clever. Okay, so great insights. So let's try to connect the dots now. So just to recap, we talked about admissions, we talked about retention, we talked about the classroom experience as separate moments. But for the students or the way the students experience that, it's just one continuous journey. They don't care about everything that's happening, on the backstage. So I'd like to bring this together and ask you too about what a cohesive human plus AI experience could look like from, inquiry all the way to, graduation. I'm not sure who would like to go first, but when you look across the life cycle, where does human and AI collaboration feels most, natural today? Any parts of the journey where, the partnership is already working, not just well, but seamless, like you cannot even tell
Mhm.
that's, AI and human?
Yeah, I can start with this one. So AI should be used for anything that requires scale, consistency, and a rapid response. So those are three things it does exceptionally well. Scaling, doing something the same and making sure it's consistent and being quick. So in the journey that could be at the very start, inquiry responses. It could move forward to like in your admissions for nudges and even in retention for nudges, reminders. If you have FAQs, AI is awesome at answering those, especially if they're really you control them so the answers are specific, progress monitoring, early pattern detection, which we talked about before, in retention, and even can be used after graduation with placement too. So it's really just think about the things that AI will save you time because of scale. If everything's the same or very similar, so AI could load that information with being able to customize it, but it's very consistent. And anything that requires rapid response where a human wouldn't be able to do it, especially after hours, 24/7, and anything where someone needs help right away, and you don't want to wait till the morning. So there's a lot of different areas it could be, but those are the three things that I look at where it's best to be used.
Perfect. And let me just ask you something. Let's say you had, unlimited resources, unlimited tech, and if you were allowed to build an ideal student journey from scratch, and you could blend, AI and human, support however you wanted, what are, two or three principles that you would, decide to use on what AI should handle and what humans should handle?
Well, I might be a little biased because I'm more on the front end side of it, but I see AI would be is exceptional at like if a lead comes in, especially if it's an enriched lead where you learn a little more about it. You might know about the source of where it came from, or there might be like a multi-step where you add gain extra information, or a quiz where you know more about them. AI could summarize that really quickly for the admission rep. So like one of the I guess the weaknesses of speed to contact, because like you want to call someone within the first minute ideally, is you don't have time to read it. But if you have a summary right there, you can make that speed to contact, first point contact call and be ready with, what you're going to say, how you're going to help the student and give them the most congruent experience possible. So in the first point of contact, I find it's extremely valuable. When getting into admissions, like there's so many different areas it could be used in admissions. Like it's almost like infinite. So I always recommend a school looks at their admissions funnel and pick the weakest part of your funnel. If you don't know best practices, you could reach out to us or any company that does a lot of admissions. They'll be able to let you know like what your numbers should be for each step in the funnel, and then find the step that you are deviating the most from best practice, so you have the most low-hanging fruit, and try to find AI to work it within that step of your funnel because you'll see the most benefit right away. If you can improve say your contact rate is 15% and you want to get it and if you could bring every percentage point you bring up your contact rate is just revenue in the back end. So that's what I like to do is identify within the funnel. And then in retention, it could be used in so many ways, like we were talking about before. But one thing that I really like is if you're doing retention surveys and you're getting information from these retention surveys, checking in at certain thresholds, it could be used not only to help you summarize the aggregation of the data, but the individual for retention, and then even possibly help with suggesting next steps or providing just more quality and instant communication within there. But I like it more for the flagging. Yeah, identify the people that you need to go in and do some retention on. And so those are three areas that I find it could be very valuable.
Amazing. Thank you. Yeah, that's super helpful. Then I'd like to pivot to you now. We already talked a little bit about this on the engagement side of things, but it's about ownership. So how should schools think about who owns AI across admissions, marketing, student success, and academics, for instance? So the entire experience feels as a one journey for the student instead of different systems. Have you had an experience with that on working with different areas, like I said, marketing, admissions? Who should actually own all the AIPs? Should they share? What's the best practices there?
No, it's great. And, just as we discussed with faculty, there just has to be buy-in. Because when it comes to development of process and policies, everybody kind of has to have the understanding of what we're doing and why we're doing that. So it's important to have the compliance officers and attorneys, again, involved with that policy development so that you examine your decisions from every angle, that protects the student, the faculty, the staff, the academic integrity, in alignment with accreditation standards, and of course, protecting the institution. And I think that once you have the buy-in and people understand why it's important, then everybody has that ownership to it. And then, of course, standardizing that with policy, that's important.
Have you noticed any teams that are more prone to use, AI? They're like early adopters inside like the institution? Any personal experience?
Absolutely. Yeah. So admissions and student services are definitely early adopters, right? Because we're communicating nonstop. Financial aid is very regulated, and so there are AI components that are now being developed within their software as well. So that has definitely, in helped them with the packaging points, repackaging points, communication with students, the behaviors, et cetera, that we've talked about. But admissions is definitely early adapter, student services and career services. And I think that we are starting to see a nice pivot now with academics because, like, I have some instructors. They will send me different things. Like they'll text me and be like, "Hey, did you utilize this AI component yet? Check it out." And one of our instructors, he gave such a good recommendation in a faculty meeting one day. He's like, "I follow, um, AI on Instagram." He's like, I follow this particular one or this one, and he's like, and I'm constantly putting an app on my phone. And I will tell you, he is a very popular instructor because his students love him and they love his creativity, and so I think that that's really helped to get everybody else kind of on board, but that would be the answer there. It's starting to see everybody evolve with it, which is exciting.
Okay, that's interesting. If I had to guess, I would say marketing first, but that's good to know.
Well, marketing, absolutely, right? Yeah, for sure. And we've had to, right? Because we started to see, different changes and things with like algorithms and everything when all this started to change. So yeah, we've had to be on the forefront with marketing um, long before anybody else. That's why
Yeah.
like we often laugh because like I'll have people tell me, "Oh, Dana, I saw this on Chat GPT the other day. I never knew," or "I'm so glad that AI has come along." And I'm like, AI has been around for a very long time, like a very long time. It's not new, um, but it is exciting to see people getting more adaptable to it, and it's exciting to see what people are starting to share about it. So.
Perfect. Okay, so just one last question before we move to Q&A. We have about 9 minutes left. So the last thing I wanted to ask is about transparency. How do you make sure students understand when they are interacting, with a system, with an AI versus a person? And why is this relevant? Why should they know that? And should they know that? Or how do you think about transparency in that way?
Like I could give it a go. I'm very much a believer that you have to be as transparent as possible. So if you're interacting with the AI agent, just tell them. Like most people are cool with that. They're not going to like some people.
I Sorry, I think we lost your audio for a second. Maybe it was just me, not
Oh,
sure. But
am I back now?
yeah, you're back.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. I just want to be as transparent as possible. The worst is when you don't tell someone it's AI and they could figure it out. They sort of lose that trust. If you tell someone it's AI right away, no problem, especially in admissions. If you have some sort of AI prompts or it's even an AI voice, if you tell them it's AI, then they could choose to work with you, which most people have no problem with, especially younger people. If they decide they don't want to, I always have it be something where you press one to speak to a human, it would ring to school, and then have a human, and you could give them the experience they want. I'm a big fan of customization and choice. So if you give the student the choice, a lot of people have no problem with AI, so just tell them it's AI. Let them know at any point of the journey when AI is being used for front facing or someone's going to interact directly with it. I want to let people know it's AI. And so they could, don't get that uncanny valley feeling like, is this a real person? Some of the giveaways are that AI answers really fast. So you ask a question, it's like bam right there, either verbally or over text, and that's too obvious. Another giveaway, I actually heard this from someone recently who said they got called by like an AI agent who said it was a human, as outside our industry, but they're talking about their experience, how it was poor, because the person spoke flawlessly. There's no ums, no ahs, no breathing. It was just too flawless, every answer. And right away they knew it was AI. And just lose trust. So I'm a big fan of just let them know it's AI right away. Like, I'm your AI agent or whatever it is. And 90% of people nowadays are totally fine with that. And the 10% who don't, give them the option. If you want a human, press here and or whatever. And they could schedule something with the human.
Yeah, no, totally agree with that. Um, okay, so we have had a lot of great questions coming in, and I'm going to open for Q&A. But before we move to answering all those questions, I want to give Dana a couple of minutes to talk about. She already mentioned the CQ task force research, and also Sterling, I wanted to give you some time to talk about the exciting project called V6 that you told me about, Virtual Advisor, which you told me is CRM's best friend. I'm also excited to learn more. And then I'm going to pull up the questions uh, in real time. So then I would like to start.
Thank you for that opportunity. And yes, so I had the opportunity and privilege of working with about 40 colleagues in our industry across our great nation in developing the CQ Best Practices Guide, where we took a deep dive and did a lot of research for almost a year, looking at how AI is, transforming higher education and especially in marketing and admissions. So there is a link to that. I would encourage you to go through it, read it. It is a lengthy document, but you can always search and see for different things that you're looking for. Within those committees, we took a look at marketing, we took a look at admissions and enrollment, and we also took a look from a legal standpoint. So I think that there's a lot of good information there for those best practices, and it was just a really nice learning experience for myself too. And in my group, just to kind of give you guys a funny point, my group, my committee, we actually started over. So like we had our document and then we chucked it and started over because the AI had transformed so much and evolved so much that what we had researched in 4 months wasn't as relevant. So we had to take a different approach to it to make sure that this document stays relevant. And we look forward to, continuing this document and making sure that people have that tools with the AI resources that you need for your student experiences.
Perfect. Thanks. And Richie, our marketing guru, who is running the show in the backstage here, just share the link on the chat. So feel free to open up. Sterling, I'll move it on to you.
Yeah, I'll be quick. For you, some of you that don't know, our product, the Virtual Advisor, is a platform that helps schools get more leads and higher quality leads through lead enrichment. And we call it CRM's best friend because it sits between the website and the CRM to help enrich the data for the CRM. And so we just launched two new tools. One of them is an analytics tool. So everything that goes through the virtual advisor before the CRM, we're able to track to a level that's a little more granular. So we could give really granular enrollment data down to anything you could think of, any demographic even. We could pull up and see what the enrollment rate is and stuff like that. And we also created our new AI studio, which is a content studio using the data we learn about the average student of a school, builds profiles by program, and then could create AI content that would be specific to that student's needs or goals based off the program. So it's emails, blog posts, article submissions, landing pages, program pages, and images. So that's a new thing we're launching in version 6 of the Virtual Advisor, which is in beta right now and is going to be launching soon.
Awesome. Perfect. So we have 3 minutes left. I think we can answer maybe a couple of questions. I apologize. This question came early in the session, but let's go over it now. So someone was asking for some of the prompts that you're using that does actually eliminate bias. The person saying we do know that AI can still get bias results. So anything you can share to reduce, bias in AI responses?
I think Sterling said it really well earlier when he was talking about making sure that you're not putting in information that would indicate bias, right? The personal information. So that's really important. So, one of the things that you want to be very careful about is demographic bias and, AI drawing conclusion. And yeah, any data analytics can draw bias. So it's just, I think that you said it, pretty well earlier. If you want to talk more about it, absolutely.
Yeah, well, the thing about AI is, especially ChatGPT, it's one I have the most experience with. I've experienced with some other ones, but that's what I have the most with. It wants to make you happy. So if you have any way it's a leading question, it will give you an answer to make you happy. So if you say to it something and you like start with what you sort of want, is this true type thing, it just wants to make you happy. It's really weird. That's why ChatGPT 5 was a bit of a failure at first because when they launched it, they took that out of it. They made it more cold and calculated, and people didn't like that. People liked the version 4, which was made people happy and told them what they wanted to hear. So you have to make your questions like you don't they can't be leading. You don't want to put what your conclusion is and is this right or not. You want to be as neutral as possible and it will pick up on any sort of lean anyway and try to just give you an answer that will make you happy at the end of the day. So that's to me is the biggest weakness of ChatGPT is often it could be led down directions. Like you could get conclusions you want out of it. So it's all about just being as trying to take that out. And sometimes you have to run it by another human. How can I make this not sound biased? And some might be, well, you said this in there that. So, and even ChatGPT could help with that. How do I make this not biased too? It'll do its best. Um, so yeah, that's what I come across a lot, is just trying to be neutral in my queries.
Perfect. Awesome. The other question we didn't have time to address in the beginning, the person was asking, they said, we have all sorts of privacy and confidentiality regulations with Canadian law and career college regulation. So how are we sure AI isn't crossing those lines while assisting us when putting the data into the machine and prompting? I think I already covered this. We talked about, some ways to avoid this, some, data anonymization tools that can also, mitigate the risk. Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you guys would like to add?
Well, if it's a federal law or it's something like that, you could always look into where the data is stored to. Maybe like look at where are the servers that are going to hold this data, and try to figure out if that's going to be something that will cause a conflict. But yeah, the easiest way is really just what you said. We just don't want to have that critical personal information in there. And if you need it, like say you want to do something based off of birthday, and that's a thing you change it into something else and then you could convert it back after you've done the work. So you don't have to actually give real information. So you just like create some sort of key, change everything by whatever characters in your key, then put it in there, and when you get it back, you bring it back to the original data. So there's ways of doing that. That's a little more sophisticated, but it can be done if you need that personal data as part of the analysis.
Perfect. We have one more question, but we're at time here, so we will wrap up. Dan, I Sterling, again, thank you so much, for taking the time, for sharing real examples and being so, transparent and honest about what's working and where the struggles still are. Richie, again, thank you so much for running everything backstage. And thank you everyone who joined us today and share all these questions and comments. Like I said, we'll send a recording, and if you like to continue the conversation or see how these ideas might fit your institution, just reply to the email, just follow up with us, and we're going to connect you with the right person. Uh, okay, we just got one last question here. Shall we generate an AI summary from this conversation? That's a great idea. I'm not sure if I had any AI note takers here, but that's a great idea. So thanks again for spending all this time with us today, and have a great rest of your day.